I don't want to cut into other people's time. So, all right. So we're going to spend a little time talking about moral injury in military families, and so this is based off the research we did where we interviewed 20 military spouses of service members with PTSD. And so that's where a lot of this research and this information comes from. Can I? Okay, the first thing I want to tell you about is that we are putting these 20 interviews in a case studies book that will be published in January. So the book, the case studies will have the narratives of the spouses that we interviewed, as well as the takeaways. And Dr. Sarah Archer is doing most of the work on this, so it'll have the takeaways from each story, each case study, so we can use that for chaplains can use it, mental health care providers can use it, veteran service organizations can use this information to help understand what the needs of these spouses were, what kind of support they didn't have, what kind of support they need, that kind of thing. And so it's not just about their narratives, but it's about how can supporting agencies and supporting groups do to help. So. Okay, I want to thank the contributors to this.
Oh, those are interesting doors.
They're judgments.
Okay, so there are many contributors to this. Myself, Kirby Wyckoff, Dr. Sarah Archer, who's on the research team, and then we have a couple of research associates also that include Felicia Folino and Garrett Brown. So we've been together for a couple of years working on this, probably going into about 3 years now. So it took a good bit of time to put together because we, unlike many research projects where your, traditional way of putting together research is by, expert, so-called quote unquote expert researchers. They design the study, they design the questions, then they find participants and they ask them the questions they think are best. We used a community participatory approach. So rather than, as we started to design this and develop this, we realized that we did not know the best questions to ask. That we needed help from those in the community that were most affected by these experiences. So we put together a pilot. We put together a group of what we called our collaborators and our partners. And these are spouses of military service members. In other words, those who would qualify to participate in the study. And we showed them our study design, interview questions we plan on asking, all that sort of thing. And they began to help us have a better question. One of the issues that we had is, as we framed the study in deciding who should be participants, we hang on.
Yeah.
I didn't need to. So when you put together a study, you have to determine who are the participants, right? You can't talk to everybody. You can't boil the ocean. And so you have to decide, how do we determine, the inclusion and exclusion criteria? What does that need to be? And so we came up with the idea of, we would look at spouses of service members with PTSD. And the way we came up with that criteria is that those service members with PTSD would most likely create situations of difficulty in the home that could potentially lead to moral injury for the spouses, right? We weren't looking at children, because you need one study population at a time. You can't do multiple study populations. We didn't love that criteria, but it was the most objective way we could come up with determining who should be in the study. And what we did is we talked to our partners who were spouses who would qualify for the study, is they gave us a couple of important factoids, which is, one, you may have a service member who has PTSD, has been diagnosed with PTSD, and the spouse doesn't know, because that information is not shared, right? The spouse can say, the service member controls who sees that information, right? So that's one. Two, there's many other cases of PTSD. So you could have a service member who absolutely qualifies for PTSD, but if they've never been diagnosed and they're creating problems in the home, never been diagnosed, then that's a spouse we couldn't interview. So our collaborators said, hey, there's got to be, we had a really, both the research team and our partners, we had a really, a lot of discussions about how do we, is this the right criteria? What we landed on was, if you're a spouse, and that includes ex-spouse, intimate partner, divorce age, whatever, so that it wasn't just spouses by marriage, but partners of a service member who is diagnosed with PTSD, might have been diagnosed with PTSD, or should have been diagnosed with PTSD, then we want to talk to you. So that's how we were able to, sort that out. We also had to make a number of other design decisions that I won't go into, but I wanted to help you frame, like, who did we talk to when we did this? And what we were trying to do is determine, is sort of catalog, describe, get narratives about the moral injurious type experiences that these spouses might have had. Many of them had never heard the term moral injury, so we used other terms like moral conflict. Did this experience create more conflict in you, and that sort of thing. So, all right, getting right into the study data because of the shortness of time here. How current or former partners perceived and described moral injury. So, how did, when we asked that question, did this create moral conflict in you? If we use the term moral injury, if they understood it, how did they describe that moral injury? What did it mean to that? So here's some of the things: a total lack of relief from deployments and or frequent moves. So our spouses talked about, we moved 17 times in 15 years. My husband deployed 6 times in 4 years. Some of the service members were special operators, so they were gone more than they were home. And so it was, while the service member is gone, you have the worry or fear, what's happened to them. They have kids to manage and take care of without anybody to help you. You have a total lack of information about what's happening, what's there, all hoping for the time when that service member will come back hopefully alive, whole, and all that. And then they come back only to, and this was the case more than once, they come back from a deployment only to find out they had the PCS in 2 months because they had to go to their next NCO course or the next officer course. So you don't even get a chance to like reintegrate, you get a chance to come back and just move. And all the stress associated with moving and all that, not to mention the service member now is really struggling with this other reintegration thing about trying to leave the war behind and all that kind of stuff. So there's this constant moving, constant unsettling, constant, it's either worry or fear when they're gone or anger and stress when they're back and then trying to move and all this other stuff. So it's a compounding sort of thing. Lack of support from military or healthcare providers. And that could be things like, why can't you talk to your commander about why you don't need to move, why you shouldn't move? And it's, PCSing, that's just the system, like nobody cares. I remember talking to the Army Reserve Command Chief of Staff. This is the Chief of Staff, 1-star general of the entire Army Reserve Command headquarters. And we were talking about these projects that we do, that, we start these new initiatives and, at this 3-star level, initiatives and change takes years, right? Yeah, it can take a year and a half just to staff it. And then it can take another 2 years to get approval at the Department of the Army level and then implementing it and all this stuff. It can take years to make any real change. Meanwhile, the lieutenant colonel in charge of the process is PCSing every year. So he PCS, a new guy comes in, takes him 6 months to figure out what the hell's going on and what's up with this project. And then he PCSes 6 months later. And I told the chief of staff, I said, well, sir, why can't people at this high of a level, why can't we have people be here for 3 or 4 years so they can actually move a project from start to finish? And you would think I had 2 heads. I mean, he just looked at me like, what do you mean? Like, that's just what we do.
Yeah.
And then other people in the room were like, that's stupid. Well, then shut the hell up about your problem about projects not getting done because you're creating your own stupid problem. And the only reason why officers and senior NCOs have to PCS every year, every 2 years, because you said so. We can change that anytime we want. There's no the fact that well, no, because of this, that's bullshit, man. You can change it anytime you want if you're willing to think systematically enough about it.
Yeah.
But PCSing every 3 years, if you're lucky, is a sacred cow that nobody can touch. So you have these spouses going, I don't understand why we have to move every year, and the service member it's just the way it is. That's very unsatisfactory.
There's no reason for it, it's our policy.
Yeah, it's like, because nobody can explain it. It's done.
Well, in fact, what you say is, it's terribly dead for different. It's the same way when they go to trade.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like you just learn the job and you're PCSing out.
Has it always been this way? I know it was when I was in 20 years ago, but before that, has it always been this way? Have people always move every 2-3 years?
I think so. I mean, it's an old way that's never been adjusted. It's one of those, the military says we care about families, but show me objectively what that means. And so the spouses felt like, just like service members tend to lose a sense of self as they join the military, spouses lost a sense of self because they didn't get to be what they wanted to be. They didn't get to be a business owner if they wanted to be one. One of the participants is a mental health professional. And she works for the VA, I think. And she's like, hey, my job matters too. I remember her saying, what she said to her husband is, normal people don't live this way.
Yeah.
Because he was like, well, it's just normal, it's the way he said, no, it isn't. Normal people do not live this way. And so spouses don't get like themselves, they get to follow the service member around the globe, right, around the US. And at some point, you start to feel like, what am I? Yeah,
A vagabond.
right.
You start all over with everything while the service member plugs into everything. And it takes like 7 months to feel settled and then you're moving in the next year.
Yeah, exactly,
It's ridiculous.
exactly. There was a lack of safety in relationships, and let me see, looking at, try to look at my next slide, make sure I know what's coming back. So lack of safety in relationships, because we're talking about service members with PTSD. And for our participants, there were no PTSD light candidates, right? It was all very serious PTSD, with the suicidal ideation, the risky behavior. One man had one service member had TBI, had who knows how many TBI, but huge lapses of memory, like months at a time, just gone, right? And so you had the service member disappearing. All the kind of like, and then the suicidal ideation. And amongst all that, there was both physical and verbal abuse to the spouse, because when you're really stressed, really angry, you take it out. The person closest to you. And so it's lack of physical safety, lack of emotional safety. Many of them talked about it felt like just walking on eggshells, and especially in public, because you didn't know what, if you could get the service member in public in the first place, you didn't know what they were going to say, you didn't know what they were going to do, how they were going to act.
Yep.
So you start like making excuses for all the social activities you get invited to, family activities, whatever it is. And then eventually, you sort of run out of excuses, but there's no safety in that. You could, just like a normal family might be sort of thing.
You run out of excuses, but you also, usually the invitations stop before the excuses run out, so like, you're not gonna come anyway,
Right.
you're isolated.
Right.
You're-
And in some cases, that's good, because then you don't have to make up something. Why you're not-
And you have to do something.
Smoking like a servant.
But there's also a lack of safety in the relationship for the children. So the spouses are concerned about what is this doing to my child? What burden am I leaving my child with now? How are they going to be once they leave the house with all this going on? Mental and emotional exhaustion, just the process of being, in that constant state of upheaval and challenge and difficulty, it's exhausting. Right? So part of that exhaustion also comes from, if the service member has severe PTSD, they're disabled, they can't work. And no disability money, that's not gonna pay. So then the spouse, you gotta work. And you gotta take care of kids, because the service member can't do that. So you're going to work, you're taking care of the kids, you're doing all that stuff, you're basically a single parent, but you also are the care provider for that service member, because the VA is not providing enough care. The VA, as people know about, how many weeks between appointments, Like, how many appointments get canceled or whatever? If you need really acute care for your service member, where do you get it?
Tell you to go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
Even if it's just, no, you know, I
Right.
need my flu shot, go to the emergency room.
Because
They won't see you.
Because then from the emergency room, they'll get triaged up if they need to get admitted, then they get admitted to acute care. I'm the acute care chaplain. So I see a lot of people who come in for that reason, they come in through the ER.
Well, because they know it'll give them attention, but I think to that point, it
Right.
just proves just how ridiculous it is. But if you want to be seen anytime soon, you better go into the ER.
That's how.
They tell you that.
That's how.
And then a number of them talk about the loss of spiritual connection with religious belief. Like prior to their service member in one way being diagnosed with PTSD, but that's not really accurate. Prior to whatever led to the service member having those PTSD symptoms, many of the spouses were connected with their church, had a strong faith, that kind of thing. Afterwards, many of them lost that connection because it's the old thing, like, why would God let this happen to me? And then part of it is too, it is very difficult to maintain faith in a God who seems to be doing nothing to act on your behalf, right? I mean, if all this is on me, what do I need you for, God? I mean, really, like, if you're not going to help me, then, and so a couple of quotes. One woman said, it's not that, I wouldn't say that I lost my faith in God, but I'm really pissed off at him. And I just can't, like, because she was Catholic. She said, I just can't sit in church and hear about everything works out for a reason. Like, I cannot hear it. One woman talked about how prior to, she had a very strong connection to her church. They were at every event the church did, at not only church services, but they had youth things and they had, community events, and she was very well connected to all those things. Afterwards, she didn't have any time for it because she had to care for the kids, work a job, care for the spouse. But also, it didn't mean, when the church is doing things and what she really needs is help with this, and it was just not meaningful for her. And so it just lost its purpose. As we've said before, it affects many life areas. So I won't recover that because we did this yesterday. But it's just in just those stories, you see really quickly how all these different things are affected. Okay, here's a couple of quotes. We moved, 14 times during my husband's career. So I mean, we didn't have a stereotypical military career. My husband was home for less than 3 total months of that 2.5-year tour. I would consider moral injury to be primarily what I was willing to allow my children to go through. Just living the way they had to live with the upheaval. So you're in this conundrum of by staying with this person, I am exposing my children to a lot of, in-home potential violence, even if it wasn't violence directly against her or against the children. It's just, punching holes in walls, the fighting, the arguing over the color of paint and all kinds of stuff. A lot of times the fighting wasn't about anything really important, but it was just anything and everything. And so within this, like I mentioned before, the constant upheaval, not just so much for her, but again, the children, like, all the new schools, all the different schools, and, you know, being a military dependent, a military child has additional challenges associated with school.
So putting the military, you know, sacrificing your family's well-being, your children's development, you know, through that
Right.
period of time, having to choose the military and that lifestyle over your own family.
Right.
Yeah.
So many of us in here have gone through this similar kind of thing with the constant moving and all. I'd love to hear comments from you about how this affected you, how difficult it was. Go ahead.
So we were dual military, so it was, I didn't think about this until way later, talking to my now 21 and 19-year-old daughters, but, and I, you know, I'm sure I take it back, but my husband and I would come home and we would debrief each other on what a stupid day it was. But imagine being like a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and you're hearing your parents like speak in aggravated tones to each other in military's language. They don't even know what you're saying. They just know you're hot and you're hot and they're like, yeah, that's right. And just that tension, they would disperse to their rooms and they would hear the tones coming through the doors and think, Mom and Dad are gonna get a divorce. When I'm talking about Colonel so-and-so being a bonehead, they think we're fighting. So that on top of the actual stress and the actual competitiveness and you're making me go to work hopefully with you and I can't, you're doing this to me and blah, blah, blah. And I just can't imagine what it was like for their little brains to be behind closed doors and thinking Mom and Dad are going at it. Sometimes it was, you were even like having fun, bullshit, you know?
And it's the same, you're in the same tone.
Right, I mean, so that, you know, he's a thief, I'm like, I wish I would have just put, you're my son. Sorry, that's.
Yeah.
All right, any other comment? So to add to that, as those families left the military because of the PTSD or the retirement or whatever, then they often moved to communities where there were no military vets or presence. So
Yeah.
then it was even more. So you have a PTSD service member, you know, with the PTSD reacting in some overblown way to the lawnmower not starting or whatever, or the hell out of it or whatever.
Yeah.
Those neighbors, like if you had veteran neighbors, they would probably be like, oh, so you need to get some help, but they would get it. But when you have just nothing but civilians, they don't.
Yeah.
Right? And so,
Who's that crazy person? No.
Yeah.
so here's another quote. If we're going to talk about PTSD and the outbursts and the anger and the, you know, the impatience, the things that he's reacting to are not big, scary triggers. It's not the fireworks on 4th of July. It's being angry because, you know, the walls are painted as well as, the walls aren't painted as well as you'd like them or something stupid. So it's often like this reaction to really small things, not the big thing. You know, you think it's the fireworks and no, it's just like, because they're on edge all the time. So one little, like, you know, whatever, it could be anything, it doesn't really matter, could set the service off. And again, that's no safety in that relationship. And Sean and Natasha are gonna, they have some personal experience as spouses, so they're gonna give some more in-depth things. So, we'll continue to talk about this more, but I want to make sure, like from me to you, that I'm speaking as someone who's observing and hearing, and you're speaking from experience. So I honor that. We just need information. You know, there are people who are 19 to 21 years old. Nobody should have to fight for proper care because not everybody has that fight in them. You know, some people have to work full time. I'm lucky I can make that battle every day. Some people have to go to work, they still have to figure it out. So that goes to, you know, it should be easy to access information and care. And if the VA can't provide all the care, it should be very easy to get community-based care. This should be easy because when you're asking people, every day is a battle to keep the service member, you know, safe, to get their children. I mean, you know, just, I have a pretty normal household, I guess, and it's chaotic and hectic all the time, right? Maggie's got a dental appointment. How's she gonna get to school? I gotta work. Well, how am I gonna get to work? And you're gonna get to school, and what are we gonna, you know, all those kind of things. But now you add, like, how are we gonna keep the service members safe? And how are they gonna get the mental health care they need? So it's just battles they don't need to fight if we have these systems and these organizations that are supposed to do that. Like, their purpose in life is to provide it. And if there's limitations on it, then let's bring in, you know, other community-based approaches. I tried to go when my husband was first suicidal. I was having panic attacks, and so I went into family practice. I got my referral to go to mental health. I spilled my guts, and I just word vomited everywhere, like, for 40 minutes. And by the time I finished that appointment, she was like, you know what? Considering all that's going on, I think you're doing pretty well.
Oh, that's disgusting.
And she would not give me a full mental health report.
You cannot make this stuff up.
I know, right?
You cannot.
It's like, how does this person have a license?
They should not.
But that's the kind of things they're running into. And it, like, there's no reason to. Like, I'd love for somebody to tell me, explain to me what the, you know.
I'm saying we have like, yeah, I just say.
Okay, we have like 3 minutes.
No, you're good.
Yeah, okay. So that's just, you know, I don't have a lot of words for that except that's bullshit.
It really is.
But it's easy for me to say that, but then how do we help? Like, that's the bigger issue, right? None of this happens in a vacuum.
Right.
If you get, just getting a spouse to reach out and try to get care is hard enough.
Yeah.
And then we have to think about, well, what am I gonna do with the children while I'm trying to get mental health care, right? So there's no child care. And if my veteran husband, and they weren't all men, some were women too, of course. But just thinking about a specific story, he can't even get the help he needs. How am I gonna get the care? That's true. It's.
If I could add a closing question to every interview that any mental health provider or chaplain asks or does, it would be, did you get what you needed? So you know when that person's leaving the room, yes, I got what I needed,
Yeah.
or no, I didn't, you need to do something for me now. I didn't get it.
Yeah, that's great.
So you can give a warm handoff while you're still in the facility, instead of waiting to go home and ruminate on it. That freaking chaplain didn't do a damn thing for me.
Yeah, I waited another 3 weeks to get an appointment, or maybe 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll cover a couple of quick quotes and then we'll take a break and we'll do Natasha and Sean, and we'll finish the second half of this tomorrow. So there's more to cover, but I want to get to. All right, when we talk about the spiritual questions, here's a couple of quotes. I think I'm just holding a little bit of a grudge, a lot of grudge, an 8-year one at this point. I think that I'm just not ready to sit there in church and be like, oh, those things happen for a reason. God does things for a reason. Like, come on, like that's, and so this particular person actually did ask for help from the chaplain. And I guess he was getting ready to deploy or something, like, I don't have time for it. It was basically more or less what he said, and then left for deployment. And so the one chance, like the one option she was gonna try to take to get help, she got that. And as those of us who have worked in the chaplaincy know, you get one chance. A lot of times, at least that, until you build that trust and rapport. And if you blow it, they're just not gonna come to you again. I felt that God should, be guiding me, and I didn't hear his voice anymore. And when I stopped hearing his voice, I just went into a really dark period. So this is somebody who, their theology and their life experience was hearing from God directly and having that relationship and communication. Not everybody sees God or feels God in that way, but this person in particular did. So when that no longer happened, and I would say from a not that I'm a psychologist, but from a psychological kind of perspective, there could be a whole lot of reasons why that didn't happen, but she at least interpreted it as God doesn't care, God's not involved, he doesn't, whatever. And so that led into a lot of depression for her, because if God doesn't care, right? If God's not willing to talk to me or help me, what chance do I have? So what we'll talk about tomorrow when we pick up is we'll start here how they describe the impact of moral injury on their partner relationship for